returning to Karazhan. We got Salute and Jack covering the play-by-play action. I'm excited to see which team comes out on top in this losers bracket matchup.
Returning to Upper Karazhan.
Right back to Upper Karazhan. I'm Rich. No, I'm just kidding. I love you, buddy. So it's really interesting, Jack, because a lot of this, you and I were actually just talking backstage as we were watching this series, a lot of it's going to come down to just a lot of that single target sustained damage. Yeah, we got some AoE, some cleave pulls too, but it's really going to come down to who's going to burn these more bosses faster.
Yeah, and nice way to burn more bosses faster is not running a healer. Team Raider IO with Asmonbald here, going into Rhett, making sure that he's going to be able to get that extra kind of single target damage. This is what we saw out of the two teams in the last series. Going at one team actually, of course, opting to have the Red Paladin versus a Prot Paladin here.
Yep.
So I actually really like being able to have the Red Paladin because there's not too much damage that's going to be going out here, and a lot of it is going to be in avoidable factors or just being able to line of sight a lot of this. So I'm very, very excited to see this, at least for the first game.
I'm more excited about this for opposite reasons. I don't get to hear you splurge on about healing for
There's one healer here, all right?
No, we're ignoring the right side of the screen. So Raider IO just now reaching the top of the stairs here. I'm surprised to see that they're not pulling too much of the extra trash along with this mob. They do get the players that get that 100% increased buff as well. Of course, we are in that. Yep.
But it looks like they're actually just holding on to that buff, waiting for two people to actually get the buff at a time, then picking up the buff, and then moving everything in there.
It is a short enough buff, though, that it'll start wearing off the first person. They can start rotating the packs in as they're doing now. They are doing two at once, so that's probably why they were waiting. Perhaps they were waiting for the correct person to get it. Maybe their tank got it, just wasn't good enough for them. Raider IO now moving in, getting a lot of that trash down, making sure to babysit those fell explosives, because along with the raging and those explosives, when it does go off, a lot of people chunk down, and with 3 deaths right off the bat, there's just a lot to babysit there, Jack. We have to take care of the explosives. Then there's the Arcane Torrent cast from, of course, those elementals that you have to interrupt, including raging on top of it. It's going to give some players, as we see here right now, Team Sabotage taking a much slower approach to it, but it's working out well for them. No deaths on the board there.
Yeah, and like you said, they're both same mob percentage. They have everything cleared out in the room, but the 3 death differential here, it was going to, and that's what we keep on talking about, that when the games are coming down to 10, 15-second differences, that's all on those deaths. So both teams engaging with the Curator right about the same time here, but the 3 death differential is something that's going to kind of haunt them as they go forward.
Especially in this map that they already knew the 3 affixes chosen by Blizzard. They knew this map was chosen by Blizzard, so it's something that both teams have really refined and practiced a lot. So as you're saying, I totally agree with you, those 3 deaths. But let's talk about the Curator for a second. 2-phase boss. We do have a 60-second phase at the beginning of the fight where we see here he will casually drop some of these lightning zones on top of the players. We do have a death coming over again from Raider IO. They do have their battle res available. They didn't use it during the trash talk, to see if they use it in just a moment. Curator being backed up, of course. You can bait these zones. They do spawn on players, so you want to run around baiting them, making sure they don't hit you. He will spawn these energy balls as well. You want to make sure to DPS them down before the damage gets out of hand. And then, Jack, we do know after that minute, we enter that evocation phase for 20 seconds.
And both teams, what they're doing is, in order to actually set up for that evocation phase, it's way more efficient as they're doing this circular strategy here, making sure that they're able to kind of pivot around the boss, and that way that whenever the evocation phase starts, they do have this nice little pocket that they're going to be able to go in stand in order to actually be able to DPS, rather than potentially having the boss stuck in some random area that the DPS is going to have a struggle to be able to get near.
So Team Sabotage opting to use their Bloodlust 40 seconds into the pull so that they get 20 seconds out of phase and then 20 seconds spilling over into the evocation phase, hoping to kill Curator or almost kill him by the time that is up. Raider IO actually popping their Bloodlust during the start of that phase, and only now using their battle rest, so I'm not sure if there was a bit of miscommunication there, but they do a ton of damage even with that 4-man comp up to this point. The 2 teams are tied at 19 apiece on Curator, hoping to finish him off, starting dragging him towards the exit as you want to save some of those precious seconds.
Well, hey, I mean, they already had a backup DPS, so they didn't have a healer, so, I mean, of course they're going to be able to just stay right in line with Team Sabotage here, but that also means it's 4 deaths. So you still have, even if they're at about the same percentage here, it's 20-second differential right off the start of the instance.
Yeah, and I mean, the Holy Paladin's damage is really nothing to scoff at the end. So even though they do have that 4 DPS comp, that Holy Paladin is really pumping out, especially during that evocation phase with the Bloodlust and all of the CDs up. 100% damage taken on the boss. Curator down to 2% on either side. Will be going down momentarily, and the teams will start working towards Shadow of Medivh.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, the Holy Pally did more damage than the dead rogue. So
that's Jack. Nothing gets by you. Very astute of you. A dead player does do 0 damage. Another tip that typically we try to give these teams if they look for any advice is that you want to get the boss's health bar to 0 prior to them getting yours to 0. Typically a great result. I know, it's shocking. Raider IO, of course, repentancing that demon, that Blade Lord, opting to move up and straight over to... Now, there's not a lot of trash we have to kill in here. We do have those worms that provide later, so you'll be seeing teams typically skip a lot of this trash and moving into Medivh's room here.
Well, you just can't pay for advice that good, man. Team Raider.io and Sabotage, again, in engaging with Medivh right off the start. You do have to worry about the 3 different spell schools, regular castable magic abilities. Of course, you have the piercing missiles that'll be going onto the tank constantly, be leaving a nasty debuff once the cast completes. You will have the infernal bolts that need to be interrupted if they hit the target, and any targets nearby. They'll deal quite a bit of fire damage and also put up a nasty dot.
Especially
and the frost
heavy melee comp.
Especially with a huge heavy melee comp. And again, you'll have the frostbite, which will freeze the player until they get broken out by, of course, putting more fire on them.
Yeah, so typically the tanks like to eat a few of the arcane missiles, deal with the debuffs. That way you're kind of saving some of these interrupts. Shouldn't be too many interrupt issues on Raider.io side. They do have 4 melee, well, 3 melee plus the tank, but 15-second timers on the interrupts. Guardian images will now always be the first phase for these two teams. Raider.io opting to destroy one of them immediately. Both teams actually getting a bit of cleave damage. Team Sabotage on one of the other ones, trying to wrap it all up as quickly as possible as the damage in this phase does increase rapidly.
Interesting differences in how they're actually killing them. Raider.io is going to one at a time individually here, while Team Sabotage is working to kind of cleave all of them down at once. Because you're in a tyrannical setting, the birds are actually not buffed by tyrannical. They are actually being buffed by fortified. So it's pretty easy to be able to actually DPS all of them down separately if you have a healer, because you're not going to really have that big of a focus, that big of a concern really about any of the damage that comes out from those birds.
Nice of you to Hawkeye the difference on this pull here, Jack. Shadow Medivh now back to now reformed back for both teams. I believe next we'll be having the Flame Wreath, which is one of actually probably the most dangerous. Now, there's 2 ways to deal with this that we've seen teams do. One of them, of course, is to spread out, making sure that you don't pass one of the 2 players that is affected range. And otherwise, they do get an Inferno Bolt off, and they get the Flame Wreath explosion, I believe, on top of it. So it looks like Raider.io is going to have a full wipe here. Not sure they'll be able to 2-man the rest of this boss down. So back to the start. Actually, not to the start. They do get the checkpoint at the boss. We do see the Flame Wreath come down on Team Sabotage. Does well to split up. Warlock should have no problem dealing with it. And I believe we have the Windwalker on the side, so they'll just have to be paid attention to just a bit by the Holy Paladin. Should be no problem since they do have that healer, Jack.
Yep, and a lot of times you'll see Holy Paladins just opt to take Beacon of Faith at this point. You are seeing Raider.io, having the pylon down, rezzing up, and just kind of getting everybody back in together. But yeah, it was crazy where Raider.io just missed the kick, and the entire Infernal Bolt just splashes over all of the melee right as Flame Wreath comes out, and they're just not able to deal with it here. So Team Sabotage opting to play on that safe side, and bringing a healer and having people live is a pretty good strategy.
A rather explosive combination for Raider.io. Jack, Team Sabotage finishing up Shadow Medivh here as one of the Windwalkers just decides to chill out and stay frozen for the rest of the fight. They will be jumping down the rabbit hole over to the Mana Devourer, the next boss of the dungeon. Now, typically teams here do skip most of the trash, if not all of it. We do see sometimes that a team will pull one of the spiders on the side to allow some of the CDs to reset and build some resources. So we'll have to see what Team Sabotage does as they fall down this very, very hypnotic hole.
Yeah, but you're seeing, of course, used to be nice. It just has ice in his veins there. And Team Sabotage sitting pretty here with 0 deaths, pulling ahead of Raider.io as Raider.io has to restart the entire boss, has to go through the entire process.
Yeah, Jack, we get it. Healers are important, okay?
Let me tell you about it a little bit more. But even then, it was kind of crazy to see that Raider.io was just missing a kick there, or just having some kind of miscommunication on a boss that just really relies on having one person calling everything out, having all this planned out, and you have so many kicks available.
Yeah, either lack of coordination or a lack of kicks there, but as we said earlier, it shouldn't really be a kick issue for them with the 4 DPS comp. They do finally get on top of the books, jump right off. Avalanche Potion, of course, there for shows as they jump off, move over, and get ready to pull Mana Devourer. Typically on this boss, we see teams pull it to the corner of the room so that you can better funnel the orbs that spawn on the boss and soak them. We'll have to see if they pull that spider on the side. Doesn't look like they are. They're just heading over straight to the boss, Jack.
Well, I mean, they don't have any fire mages, so they can't burn the spider with fire, so it's better just to avoid them entirely. Team Sabotage here, moving on to Mana Devourer. And like I said, getting the full screen treatment here as we're able to pull it into that corner. And of course, important to note, when you're talking about the energy levels of Mana Devourer, he will periodically start spawning those orbs out, expending extra mana, and in a 360-degree zone. But if you're pulling it against the wall, it'll block out that usually 180, 160-degree area and funnel all of it right underneath the boss's hitbox, where there's a small delay where you're going to be able to kind of scoop up everything, and usually using some kind of immunities from the Holy Pally, the Bubble, the DK being able to pre-AMS and to be able to get rid of all of them. Or if you just have your tank soak up a bunch of them, and you can easily just start standing in some of these purple tornadoes and just start clearing them out, no problem.
Yeah, you do not want the Mana Worm to get that 100% Dragon energy. The Mana Devourer here, though, it's important to note that the balls that you soak, the Mana Orbs, actually do give you an Unstable Magic 5% damage buff. So some players opt to soak it on purpose and try to hold on to it for that extra buff. But that dot could get out of hand pretty quickly. So we're seeing none of the players opt to hold on to it here, all stacking under the boss. Just to make sure, first of all, that they're in the corner, and of course to start baiting as well. The problem with this is that these kind of tornado shadow zones that you use in order to cleanse the buff does spawn close to players, so you do run the risk of spawning it under the boss and causing it to displace you from the corner. Fortunately, no bad RNG for Team Sabotage in that regards here.
Yep, and you're seeing, Too Fast did end up actually picking up a buff and quickly clearing it out once, of course, he ran out of CDs. Team Raider.io, again, is going to be losing some people on MDI. They have 4% left. They're pretty light on kicks and interrupts and stuff like that at this point.
Tanks,
but they are able to deal with the chilled phase, and are able to deal with the endless winter, so they are actually able to get through all of it. And at this point, you're just going to have everybody wait for their Paladin just to get to the bottom of that of their drop, get on top of those books, and that will actually spawn the next checkpoint for them. So you'll kind of see them just waiting for him to actually get down there, rather than releasing or actually attempting to res him, because they would take much longer.
Yeah, I mean, jumping down that hole is, I think, like 30, 45 seconds only. That it takes a fair bit. Mana Devourer on Team Sabotage on the right side, about to fall here. The players will regrow to their full size and then be surrounded by 15 Mana Devourers. Once again, however, due to the large size of the players, these, of course, now become trash mobs and not bosses. Now, teams do pull all 15 here and kind of try to funnel them to the hall, but they have to be very careful here with the explosive orbs. A lot of babysitting needed, and there could be some bad luck with how many orbs, well, not only how many orbs spawn, but kind of where they spawn before they pull them into the mouth of this hallway.
Yeah, and part of the way to kind of deal with bad luck is to just completely dodge it as best as you can here. So they're pulling all of the little Mana Devourer ads into this corner. They're all standing up against this wall to make sure they're dodging any of the explosives that might be coming out here, and just to be able to focus fire and get all these ads down very quickly. A lot of times you'll see Unfortified, for example, they'll try to actually kite a lot of these worms down this hallway, so that way you're not even having any, because they will take longer to kill, and that way none of the extra mana orbs are actually going to move back into them, and you'll be able to just kind of run away from them as fast as you can.
Yeah, and somebody can trail behind and soak the mana orbs that they do spawn, so it helps them out. Sabotage now moving over to the Bridge of Doom leading up to the chess event. These Fell Bats just kind of pummel the area with some of their Fell Breath, but you can pull them down via a taunt from the tank. Once they get that taunt debuff or a grip, they will fly down, but then you have to be really careful for their frontal breath, making sure it doesn't hit any of the players, does a ton of damage.
Yeah, and here they're opting to get rid of these Fell Bats just instead of having to actually deal with any of the other trash mobs, because again, it is raging and it can be kind of quite painful to deal with the Magician ad and of course the Slayer ad. So using the Invisibility Potion, crossing this Bridge of Doom to start getting on to Visidoom here in the chess event.
The chess event will start here, and I believe it gives about 7-8% around that, so they will have some trash to cover up, but teams often opt to kind of skip everything, get to the chess event, pull it, and then during the RP where the rest of the chess bridge forms towards Visidoom, the final boss, they'll head back out and pull an extra 2 or 3 bats to complete their percent. For this chess event, of course, it is important to note that the king is essentially immune to damage until you start killing off the chess pieces. At that point, he will get a stun for a while, and once you dip him below 30%, he will not regain his shield and get immunity. So the goal here is to kill 2 to 3 pieces, make sure you can DPS the king down to 30%, and then move on from the encounter, because as soon as the king dies, it's checkmate.
Right, you are, Sloot. And Team Sabotage, again, getting that first knight down and just burning the king as rapidly as they possibly can. They might have, looks like they're going to have to take down 1 more, so of course they got quite a bit of cleave damage out there on the Rook, and the Rook is fairly close into the king, so they should be able to easily get some boss damage into it. They're not having to run very, very far away, and that's a nice thing when you're able to have that extra kind of cleave damage when these chess pieces are going to be sitting nice and pretty close to the king. Makes it so much easier to be able to focus fire 1 down very quickly, get back on top of the king, and like you said, checkmate here coming in.
King is about to fall here for Team Sabotage, and we do have actually 8% on the board, so just a bit over what we, what I guess, because I just frankly couldn't remember the right percent. Now, we have the DPS heading right back out immediately to pull 2 more of those bats. They're going to DPS them down, Tank's going to make sure to face them away, and then they're on the bridge towards Visidoom after this.
Yep, and Team Sabotage is mopping up the rest of these Fell Bats, and that's one of the nicest things, is because you do need to have one player actually move forward to start activating the door to open up the room for Visidoom to be able to take care of it. So Team Sabotage, 0 deaths so far. Raider.io at 13 and is just now moving towards that bridge, has not engaged with the chess event just yet.
I mean, they're going to have to hope for a Christmas miracle here in order to be able to catch up and win this map. Team Sabotage looking really strong at the moment as they move towards Visidoom, the final boss of the dungeon. Of course, a 3-phase boss. We do start at the main platform. platform, and at 66 and 33% will fly to a different Legion ship flying in the air, and both gain and bolster some of the abilities that he has.
Yep, and Team Sabotage here, getting back onto that full screen. It's always important to note you will have to deal with that burning blast that's going to come out from Visidoom. We put, you know, a light dot that's going to be onto the tank, but it can be quite annoying to deal with. When you're on this opening platform, the Legion ship will, of course, just fire away a laser that will just follow one player. Important to always be running when you get targeted by it and try to just stay away from it as best as you can. You'll also have to start dealing with the Decimate, which will be coming out quite consistently. Just that laser that'll be knocking a player back, and on this Tyrannical thing, it can come quite close to killing them. And also, you'll have to deal with the orbs. It'll be a debuff that'll be on one player to start with on this first platform. The first Legion ship that we go to will be 2, and then the final Legion ship will be 3 different players affected by it. Nasty dot, and then when you dispel it or when it expires, you will have those different shadow orbs that are going to be spawning outside.
And we do have to be careful, Jack, as well, for this Fell Bombardment. You have to keep an eye on it. It does do a ton of damage in this Tyrannical setting to the players. Now 66 approaching here quickly for Team Sabotage as the portal is put up and they run in. During this kind of transition mobile phase, the boss will get, I think, 99% reduced damage. So, you know, redotting is nice because you do have to kind of cross the entirety of this ship here as the boss is staring you down with some beams and will punt you backwards and also punt you off the ship once you get there. You also have to be careful of those kind of staticky lightning, fell lightning zones on the side, as they will pulse for an immense amount of damage. So you need some kind of CD or immunity to run safely through those unless you're moving really quickly or blinking.
Yep, and as you're seeing here, they actually are moving up close to the boss. They're able to take care of that fell explosive as they're kind of waiting for everyone else to kind of catch up. Once you enter that circular platform that they're just now stepping onto, that will then activate the boss, and he will stop casting, of course, that Decimate to try to push you off. It'll make it a lot, sorry, they disintegrate, and it'll make it a lot easier just to be able to kind of engage with them there. And like you said, you always have to kind of watch your distance as you're going in from the boss here. And even when you're going to be going from one of the fellowships to another, you also, while the boss does have that 99% reduced damage, you also have that advantage. So if you have 2 players who are affected and you push the boss quick enough, we've seen some teams who have opted to lust here at this platform, Team Sabotage opting to hold on to it, but you also have the opportunity to kind of jump into that portal if you're going to be early enough, and then of course the balls will expire once you are actually halfway in between the ships, affecting nobody. But like I said, they're opting to hold off on lust here, and it will be a nice advantage when they're able to just completely decimate the mobs when you're coming into this last platform.
Team Sabotage not even batting an eyelash right now, while Raider.io just starts on the boss, as we can see on the left side of the screen, reaching the final platform for Team Sabotage. They will once again need to traverse all of it in order to access Visidoom again. Here we do have some Fell Lords and occasionally Fell Lords that will spawn from portals at the edge. If you fail to interrupt the boss's like 14-hour cast, then he will spawn them at a very alarmingly increased rate, but they do have access to their Bloodlust here, so the boss should be falling pretty quickly.
Yep, and also very, very important to watch out for is going to be some of the just splash damage that can be happening, especially when you're in a very, very heavy melee comp. You're saying you used to be Nico, just taking a huge chunk of damage there because everyone is so tightly packed in together in melee. There's a lot of splash and extra damage that can go out, but great job here by Kagu, making sure he's keeping up. And all you have to do at this point is heal up everybody, dodge these orbs. Team Sabotage, sealing out game 1.
All right, but what do we think went wrong for Raider.io? Obviously, 65 seconds of stoppage. Do you think it could maybe be... It's Darkheart Ticket, the first time that we get to see it today. It is Raider.io's map pick. They are behind by 1 against Sabotage.
So what do you think, Jack? We're going to have a big skip on all the parade of animals at the start here, or we're going to have a lot of kills with the cats and the bears?
I don't think I'm really ready to go to the zoo at this point. Maybe ask me tomorrow.
There's no Beastmaster Hunter here. Indeed. Not shocked to see, of course, Asmonbold going back to that Holy Paladin flex. This dungeon would be really tough, especially with his explosives and the Grievous to deal without a healer. So right away back to that Holy Paladin. We see a huge pull come in. Not a huge pull, but pretty standard pull with his first 2 packs. They incorporate the bear on top of it. But these cats are really dangerous. They can dish out a lot of damage as they jump to one of the distance targets. So right meow, we're going to have to make sure that there's a lot of attention paid to the Warlock and perhaps even a pre-bob.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you want to be able to kind of go into there when you're having those pulls, like you said, starting off with a pre-bop and Paladin, just a huge toolkit to be able to kind of deal with these. You know, you'll be able to bop them. You could follow it up with a sacrifice. You could escalate that into Aura Mastery if you really need to, if the damage from the bears is going to be getting really high. But again, it's going to be a 22, and it's not fortified, so you will have a lot of opportunities to be able to kind of skip around a lot of these mobs, and in many ways, they will just kind of melt whenever you're going to be engaging with them here.
So Raider.io using their mass stealth there to skip past most of the trash in that huge open area leading up to Gladialis' room, as Team Sabotage has already dealt with that Hippogriff pack, and they as well are pulling some extra trash on the side that are incorporating into their percentage. So they'll have a bit to go before they get to at least, crudely on the map where Raider IO is right now. But in terms of trash percentage, they're looking about the same. Of course, lots of optional trash as well in Shade of Xavius' log and some of the keeper packs following the first boss. So we'll have to see what they opt to skip and what not. Typical skip here seen from the Rogue. He will pull these 2 bears to the side, proccing that cheat death, and then vanish at the last second while the 4 players run safely to the other side. The bears, upon the Rogue vanishing, the bears will then run back into place.
Yeah, and you're seeing here out of Raider IO making sure they're just pulling into Gladalis, instantly getting that lust off here, and pulling in a lot quicker than Team Sabotage. And this is what I was kind of talking about with why I think Darkheart Ticket is such a nice pick, is when you have larger instances that have a lot of options for where you want to pull to, how much trash that you want to be skipping here, having these options I think can be a much better way of responding to other teams when they're not practicing with this, when they're not playing as efficiently, not playing as smoothly. We've seen it with teams who made, for example, Arcway their pick, when they had the triple Windwalker come out. They had specialized pulls just for that instance, and when their opponents played it like they would just ordinarily play it on live servers, they got crushed, right? And this is what you kind of want to be able to see, is already getting Lust on cooldown, already being able to engage the boss, and really not having a large differential in trash percentage. Raider IO is just starting off really strong. Yeah,
I mean, Gladalis going down really quickly for Raider IO. We do have the Bloodlust finally finishing 10 seconds ago. Gladalis reaching that 50% mark. He will transform into a cat 2 times in a row, jumping on the furthest target, applying a Grievous Wound on top of the regular Grievous affix that exists, and that needs to be healed up above 90% as well, much like the affix, as we can see Asmonbald eating it on the outside, healing up quickly, making sure it doesn't get out of hand. After those 2 cat transformations, he will transform into a Grizzly, as we see here on the screen, hitting the tank with his bare arms and doing a lot of damage, punting them into the wall and then charging in their direction. The trick here being, of course, to have your back to a wall, because the hitbox collision of the boss will actually impact the wall first, and he will lose his transformation prior to doing damage to the tank.
That's right, and I love the close-up that you're seeing for Asmonbald there to be able to kind of bait out a lot of those jumps here. And Team Sabotage is actually just having a full wipe. I think it might have just been one of the lead-ups, of course, to Gladalis that they might have ended up wiping on. So they're kind of waiting for the rest of the Nightmare to clear out before they actually end up taking the pylon res there.
I mean, this run is looking like a nightmare for them from the get-go. Raider IO down to 10% on Gladalis. Once they finish him off, they will obtain the one and only checkpoint for the map. So should they die at any point after this, they will have to release here unless they get a pylon down or a battle res.
Yeah, and you've seen Raider IO actually spending that battle res on Jedmo there to help finish out the boss fight. But a couple seconds later, they get that checkpoint like you just mentioned there. I mean, they should be listening to you more, buddy.
I mean, yeah, that was a questionable battle res. But, nonetheless, it hopefully works out for them. Hopefully they won't need it later. Especially, but, we're approaching some of the more dangerous bosses. The next 3 bosses on Tyrannical can pack a punch. Raider IO now dealing with the Dryad and the Blossoms here in the meantime. Now, I'm shocked to know, I was actually about to say I'm shocked to not see the Dryad being gripped immediately by the DK, but he actually grips it out of the pack with the Keeper on the side while it's patrolling far enough from the Keeper pack so that it doesn't chain proxy onto the Keeper pack, so they should be able to safely run by here in a moment.
Yep, and that's one of the things you always be able to take advantage of is going to be, the Repentance, or, Drew is going to always just have the Root to be able to, or just have a Sap to be able to kind of quickly get past that without too much of an issue here, because it can be such a pain to really get around, deal with the Dryad that's going to be patrolling around, which will end up chaining into all the rest of the trash packs there. So right here, you're going to be pulling, the next Dryad and then going behind the house to be able to take care of the rest of the garden of flowers here. Kind of mean what we're doing, and of course just beating up somebody's flower patches, but you got to do what you got to do.
I mean, you got to cross-pollinate, Jack. We've been over this before, going around the back, pulling up all these petunias and DPSing them down. Now, typically teams do actually go in the house once they're DPSing these, but the reason here, of course, is that there's only that one Dryad, which the DK can grip every 15 seconds, because that's about the time frame on when the Dryad will kind of try to get out of the group and throw that poison spear tip into other players, getting that poison dot up on them. Team Sabotage on the right side, of course, we haven't forgotten about them. They are at 46% mark on Gladalis, well dealing with boss mechanics there. Raider IO, I'm curious to see if they're going to end up skipping this Keeper pack coming up here, because a lot of teams do typically skip it.
A lot of teams do skip it, but you'll usually see, I mean, we saw, for example...
They're skipping it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, I was just waiting to see where the Rogue was going to be positioning to, because, of course, the Blossoms will not follow and will not chain together with the Keepers, so you are able to, of course, just skip right past, the Keepers, get them moved around, and then you're going to be able to pull those Blossoms in with the Dryad here.
So, yeah, they do grab this pat leading up, and then after this, we will have the 5 Dwellers. The Dwellers being, or the Gooies as we call them, the Dwellers being, particularly dangerous mobs if they're not kept in check. They will do a lot of channeled casts. Tormenting Eye, I believe, is called on the players that, if not interrupted interrupted will fear you and nuke you. Actually, it'll dot you during that channel time, and then at the end it will nuke and fear you if not interrupted properly. So it's not only important to interrupt it, just generally speaking, towards the end, but get that interrupt right away and get that CC up.
Yeah, and you're seeing another death coming out for Team Sabotage here. Just losing another Windwalker, and this is something that they really just can't afford. And when you get into this situation where you're just losing people on the boss fights, especially tyrannical boss fights, it makes it so much more difficult and so much more time-consuming to really get down. So just as Team Sabotage is taking down Glade Alice, Raider.io is clearing out all the GUIs here and making sure that they're getting these all cleared up, rotating through their Arcane Torrents, rotating through group stuns to be able to clear this out. So Raider.io is just sitting really pretty.
Raider.io, of course, enjoying that Arcane Torrent while it lasts. They won't be able to do this in the future. The Dwellers down now, sub 50%. You do need to kill all 5 of these Dwellers in order to get access to Darkheart, our resident tree boss of the dungeon, which of course does not incur any puns on our team here as they're rearing up to pull the boss in just a moment. We'll usually start with one of those early stomps, Jack, but once we were talking to Rich pre-match, this is one of the bosses that came to mind in terms of some of that dangerous damage that he does, including his smash and the tank grip.
Yep, and one of the things, as you're seeing everyone kind of just getting stacked up together here, is also going to be those extra roots, and also the proximity healing. Like you said, getting everybody in range for the Light of Dawns, and being able to quickly top off, of course, from a lot of the big stomp damage here. But you're also seeing for Team Sabotage really working to catch up and do whatever they can to catch up. So they're taking care of all of the little flowers coming in together. They really need to just start getting back into this game here because they're 7 deaths behind. Or sorry, they have a 6 death differential. They have 7 deaths total here, and it's going to be so difficult at the rate that Raider.io keeps going in order for them for Sabotage to catch up.
And of course they do well as well to manage those explosive orbs with that big pull, but all eyes on Darkheart right now. He does have that frontal breath we've mentioned, of course the crushing grip on the tank, which does a ton of damage, and that AoE stomp, as we just saw. The tank will be able to use their consumption on every other stomp because it comes 30 seconds apart, and we do have the consumption on a 45-second CD, so a bit of help there for the healer in that regard. Not to mention we do have those roots that go down that some players opt to kind of just leave to see if the multi-daughters can get some extra damage, what have you, but oftentimes players, especially with the Paladin on hand, will have that freedom, so they just run through the roots and cleave them down.
Yeah, but as you're seeing, they just had the little banish there on the sapling, so that I believe that, the Warlock could just make sure that he's able to get his quick and easy Sephu's proc every single time there. But you are, as you're seeing, again, seeing that skip coming out for Team Sabotage there. They don't have the ability to kind of take advantage of like the rogue skip or have like the hunter skip instead, so they just have their tank go out there and allows them to get the full mass res to be able to reach him. But Darkheart here going down to 31% as you're having that tank grip here. One of the nicest things to be able to kind of rotate through a lot of these cooldowns. It's not going to be the most difficult at the 22 level, but it's still always very important to make sure you're kind of rotating through cooldowns, especially with the wealth of abilities that Paladin has available to them with Sacrifice, with Aura Mastery, and always just being able to have such strong single target healing to help out the DK. When he needs it. He doesn't need it that much, but whenever he needs it.
Usually not. You usually have Vamp Blood accessible. If you have enough haste switch in this gear, they should have Vamp Blood accessible for every crushing grip, and of course AMS for every other, just as kind of extra padding. Here's another crushing grip right now. Will be thrown to another player. Darkheart now down to 8% health. A really unbelievable performance here from Raider.io.
So close.
After this, they will be running off towards the goos. Not much trash left between this boss and Dressron. Just a couple goo packs and of course those Blood Fury large mobs.
We were so close to getting out of Darkheart without any puns. We got so far.
I was about to leave it alone, but I decided not to. Moving up here to the goos, as we mentioned. Now, the Blood Fury is a mob that we want to keep an eye on because it does split into lesser Furies, lesser Blood Furies, that will cast and also metamorphosize into one of these bigger mobs again. But they don't give any percent, Jack, so teams often just pull these either to the side or the road, whatever it may be. They stun it at the end when it's low percent, and the melee run away while the range finish it off in order for that split to happen, and they can skip the smaller mobs.
Yeah, and they actually really need to work on their positioning as we speak right now because it is getting pretty low and they do need to make sure they're able to kind of get away here. So, okay, the Warlock does start moving. It was kind of weird when they started pulling back on top of the Warlock and he was just kind of sitting there waiting for it. So it's good that they were able to kind of get out of range of that quickly enough. But it also is kind of positioned in the middle of the road. So important to note, if anybody dies, the run back for them is going to be very harrowing because they will have to deal with those Blood Fury droplets. And if those Blood Fury droplets activate, they can actually turn into full-blown grown-up Blood Furies going to college and stuff.
We don't want that. That's quite the drain on the wallet. The last pack of Ooey Gooey Rich and Chewies is being led into the boss room. Now, there's about 9 or 10 of these per pack, so you do have to make sure you're dealing well with the explosives. Leading up now to Dressron, the third boss, Jack. Jack, we kind of discussed this before the fight. Now, you mentioned, obviously, of course, there is an advantage to pulling the whelps, but they have to be careful just how many they pull here extra with the boss, because the more whelps there are, the more orbs are going to spawn, and the more left will babysit, and it'll start actually to negatively affect the damage on the boss if there's too many spawning. Yeah,
and it really puts a lot more pressure onto the tank, not only to deal with all the extra mobs that are going to be hitting you with you, but also probably just to make sure you're taking care of all those explosive orbs, because at many points in time, you're going to have the Paladins not going to be in melee if they're getting, for example, going to be getting pushed back. They might be, sidestepping off to one edge of the room to be able to drop off those cave-ins like we were talking about. But you're seeing, a very tight clump here to make sure everyone's kind of staying in that similar position, to be in range of Light of Dawn, to be in the right position there, and trying to stick right underneath the boss here. So very, very good plays out of Asmongold, and this also allows him to just deal out much more damage than he otherwise would. He's spending as little time as he really needs to be able to get everybody topped off. He's just casting, a couple of his flashlights to be able to get everybody topped off, then funneling all of his holy shocks to be able to just pump out more and more boss damage here.
Team Sabotage, of course, axing Okark, excuse me, a question on the side there. Dressaron now down to 40% health. It is important to know that with this pushback mechanic, the closer you are to the center of the hitbox of the boss, we're talking about that red circle under the boss, the less you will be pushed out. So if you're caught out by yourself, one of the casters, and you don't have mobility or a Warlock portal back, what have you, you will get pushed out quite quickly and spawn some whelps on the side, which could be disastrous. We do see the cheat death proc over there on Swag Step, their rogue with that cave-in. He did actually get clipped by the frontal breath from the tank there as well, though.
It looked like Lepan was actually grabbing more whelps as Swag Step was just DPSing into the boss. So, of course, it's going to be the closest target that will end up getting breathed on. So, when Swag was just a little bit too close, the breath pivoted and actually hit him. And thankfully, again, there's the cheat death, and thankfully the melee wasn't too tightly stacked in together here. But this is kind of an awkward position where you're having all kinds of whelps going out, huge cave-in damage that Asmongold just needs to be able to top off, and you're not really having a wealth of cooldowns that are really going to be available to you. You were seeing he was using his Rule of Law to make sure he's able to kind of stretch his range there for the Light of Dawn. That way he doesn't have to be right on top of everybody else, but he's also trying to get his Tears Deliverance off to make it a little bit easier once he does end up engaging and start spamming more and more flashes to be able to get everybody topped off. But you are seeing Swag going down. Asmongold was just spamming Light of the Martyr to be able to kind of keep everybody up. But this is the disaster scenario that's coming out when you're falling behind with a lot of these Grievous stacks. Thankfully, they got everything down, but that's one of the scary situations that you're running into a lot of times when you're not able to get all these taken care of immediately, when you don't have your CDs, for example, just being able to save for those safer situations. You really can get burned here.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, it started falling apart before it became the full Emerald Nightmare at the end. The boss was only at 2-3%, so they managed to chisel him off. Jack, I'm also really disappointed. You said that there was a wealth of cooldowns. You could have said a whelp of cooldowns, of course, with all those whelplings. We'll have to discuss this later.
Sorry,
they do head down into Shade of Zievis' log. Now, there's a bit of RNG with this pat of the 2 imps and the 1 summoner leading up to the stationary pack. Quite nice to see for Raider IO here. Typically, we'll see teams kind of AoE grip everything together if they're not skipping it and just opt to kill all 7. Team Sabotage, of course, on the right side of the screen has moved on to Dressaron. They're working at him at 70% right now.
Yep, and Lepan here making sure he's getting all these, all the not only the bats, but all of course, these extra mobs, all the other casters, the summoners, grabbed in all together to have just one very large pull to kind of finish off the rest of the trash percentage here. Very important to make sure you keep your dispels up onto the tank, because the blood hunters, or blood seekers, the bats just deal a very, very nasty disease that needs to be dispelled constantly. Also important to watch out for the curse that the summoners can actually spawn out, because it will not, well, it's while it's not, yeah.
No, you're talking about the curse, not the
curse.
No.
Yeah. So while Paladins cannot dispel curses, the curse is actually a slow and a haste debuff. So you're actually able to use Blessing of Freedom to be able to remove it entirely. So it's a nice workaround there for Holy Pallies.
But we do have that Dread Inferno from the Imps, which is particularly dangerous as well. A lot of real estate taken up. The players need to run off, make sure they don't pop on the rest of the group. We do well here, of course, to use that Math Stealth, sapping that bat to make sure it doesn't detect any of the players as they go by. They're already at their 100% trash mark, getting ready to pull Shade of Xavius. And I mean, there's a plethora of mechanics to talk about on this boss, having that 50% tag as well with the huge AoE explosions, but lots to look out for, particularly for the healer on this fight. We have the Nightmare Bolt, we have the Corruption, we have the Dispel, we have the Dot, and of course for the players, they have to get out with the Paranoia as well, Jack.
Yep, and you're seeing there getting out not only with the Paranoia, but actually dodging the Nightmare Bolt entirely at a Q, making sure that he's able to take his own Demonic Circle to be able to dodge that Nightmare Bolt so that it does not even actually go for him. So if you're able to get out of range quickly enough, you see this a lot of times with Marks, Hunters, of course, like we just saw with the Warlocks, and also with Boomkins, where they're able to get past the maximum range and go even further back to make sure that they can dodge those Nightmare Bolts entirely. This also allows them to, you know, not have to worry about positioning, not having to worry about standing near other people, and also just not worried about getting potentially one-shot by a Nightmare Bolt and saving their CDs for later on.
So, of course, Asmonbald did get caught, unfortunately, a bit there with one of the Nightmare Bolts. He was kind of halfway to ranged, halfway to melee. When you do get hit with that Nightmare Bolt debuff, you do get a 20-second pacification debuff, and if none of your buddies are standing within that circle, you will be pacified and unable to basically do anything. So he ran right away into melee, making sure to shed that off. Shade of Xavius quickly now approaching that 50% mark, where there's going to be a pretty substantial amount of damage on the raid. He does go back to mostly his phase 1 abilities, with the slight difference that there will be swirlies falling from the ceiling. Any swirly that connects with a player will do some damage to them, but any that connects with those Shade of Xavius' hitbox will buff the boss by, I believe, 5% damage done, stacking up to 10 times. So things could get pretty out of hand in that regard, which is part of the reason why they're kind of tanking him in this corner, because you avoid a lot of the potential swirly range that could drop.
Yeah, but you're seeing here at a Radar.io the 50% transition coming up. Asmonbald did not have his own personal bubble, or opted not to use it instead. So he pops Aura Mastery, he pops the Divine Protection, hits Judgment to get full damage reduction going out there. And Swagstep actually dies through...
They didn't get the Dispel way too late.
It looks like he just actually dies through his cheat death, and we're seeing actually a full team wipe here coming out of Radar.io, and this is just the disaster scenario that they really can't afford.
Asmonbald just kind of standing there by himself right now, so maybe having some issues, but the team does go down, which is probably why we didn't see the Dispel on that rogue, and things started kind of falling apart as Team Sabotage is working their way to the last pack on the right side right now. They do have to deal with this pack that Radar.io opted to skip on account of they had 100%, and well, Team Sabotage doesn't, so they need to kill these final mobs, and then they too will be pulling Xavius. But in this case, they have they're in favor by 2 deaths because of that, and they do have Bloodlust available.
Yeah, and this is just the disaster scenario that Team Sabotage really needed to be able to capitalize on in order to get everybody back into this. Radar.io has a very, very limited window in time to be able to pull this boss, you know, get everybody fed, augment runes up, and everything like that to be able to pull this boss. But Team Sabotage has Bloodlust available, is all set and ready to go, and Radar.io, this is going to be a struggle for them because now they're on the other side of the death differential.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that was fed so far was Shade of Xavius, but they're going to have to turn it around here. They do, not only do they have to overcome it now without the Bloodlust, but as you said, Jack, they have to beat the boss by at least 10 seconds. They don't have access to Bloodlust, and they only pulled slightly ahead of Team Sabotage, so this is going to be a really tight race right now. And they probably actually don't have a lot of those CDs available.
Yeah, they don't have their 3-minute cooldown. Thank you. I was just about to say that. It's just, how are they going to be able to survive consistently through this intermission here? I mean, I saw that Asmonbald, for example, did not opt to use his Divine Shield personally for that, but he did end up using Aura Mastery. So did he end up using Blessing of Sacrifice as well? I mean, he might be able to get that back in time before that 50% transition, but this might just be a huge scare that they don't have a battle res available, and they might just straight up lose somebody going into that 50% mark.
I mean, Team Sabotage, you know, a bit of poor RNG for them to get the Nightmare Bolt out on the Warlock. Doesn't have an immediate port to the melee, has to run in by himself, so they lose a bit of damage there. But of course, they are ahead at this point, well ahead of Raider.io, on account of having access to that Bloodlust and all of those 3-minute CDs at the start of the fight. And really, all eyes are going to be on that 50% mark and what happens there for both teams. That's really going to be kind of the riggedy stand on the fight.
Yeah, and you know, we are able to, and you are seeing, of course, like the Warlock for Team Sabotage just standing out at range to be able to hopefully either use his demonic portal to be able to jump backwards, or use his demonic circle, either one of them to be able to outrange it. So I think it might have been more of a timing thing on his part to be able to have to worry about. You know, Radar.io, of course, having Asmonbald running away because he does have the growing paranoia, while Attiku, the Warlock, does have to run into melee to actually get to deal with, of course, that Nightmare Bolt. So you are seeing the bubble coming out for Asmonbald, so it is lucky that he was able to keep that, lucky that he was able to have that. And they're not too far away from Team Sabotage, but that 10-second differential is just haunting them so hard right now.
Yeah, and it's going to be really tough to overcome. I mean, at this point, you know, we reach this point in matches, Jack, a lot of the time where they're really just hoping for a wipe for Team Sabotage at this point. Is really the only way they're going to catch up, or at least some kind of 1-2 DPS die, and Team Sabotage tries to finish the fight out, and they do it too slowly. But right now, I mean, it's looking like it's going to be Team Sabotage taking the Series 2-0. We'll have to see. But, you know, there are a couple of swirlies landing on Xavius. We do have a death going down on Dollar that's going to add, and that's going to negate 5 of the seconds that they have to overcome. But they do have the battle res available, so they get him up right away.
Well, that's one of the scary things, is even with wings up, Kagu was unable to keep Dala alive. And all it will really take is, you know, Shade of Xavius using one more of those feet on the weaks there that could just be absolutely destroying those Windwalker monks, and because it is on Tyrannical, you really have to watch out and really have to be careful with being able to heal these. You're getting Kagu ends up bubbling himself to be able to deal with that Nightmare Bolt there. He's just working on staying together with his Warlock to be able to get it down here. Raider IO is a little bit ahead.
This is it's down to 5 seconds. If Raider IO wins this by 5 seconds or more, they will actually still end up winning the match. So they down the boss here. We have 3 seconds left for Team Sabotage. They're going to be able to pull it off. It's down by 1 second. They actually end up winning anyways and tying the series up. Rich Campbell, back to you at the desk.
That's actually insane, even with the CC coming in. You see, we're headed to Nels. We've seen this dungeon quite a few times, but a little bit of spice being added in here in the final hours in this elimination match. One team will be sent home, one will go on in that lower bracket, and they're up against Necrotic.
Rich, right you are. Sugar, spice, and all things nice. Jack, off to you.
Thanks, buddy. Raider IO, Team Sabotage, one team going home here. You are going to be seeing that familiar intro pull that's going out here. Both teams getting the free Blessing of Protection going out as they both sky step in. And I love being able to see this. I mean, you mentioned getting a free AMS going off. But when you're able to have effectively the same tool being going out there, it just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, really smart for them with that pre-bop. Able to kind of just go down that really long cave hallway, if you will, pulling everything together. Now, the Hulk, Jack, is probably the one thing we have to talk about here. The Hulk does a big frontal called Fracture on the tank that will punt you in shortly after they do a huge frontal cone unless they get displaced or stunned. Now, the DK is well built for this because you can actually grip after every fracture as it comes 15 to 17 seconds later. But if you do that, you also might get that Necrotic refreshed as you grip. We do see Lepan there doing just that, but he's only at 4 or 5 stacks. We only have 3% healing debuff and dot application per stack, so it's nothing too unmanageable just yet, Jack.
And you're seeing, both Hulks going down there. It wasn't easy being green, but, they were able to deal with it without too much of a problem there. But you are seeing attack actually dropping very, very low there. Actually proccing Purgatory as well. So it is very interesting. I guess he's not going to be able to get that back. So usually you'll see sometimes where tanks just want to be able to reset their Purgatory, but they have a long time before they're really going to be able to need it back. So at this point, it's something to be concerned about when they go later on, when they go to the trash after this boss, because Purgatory won't quite be up yet, but see how it goes.
Also, important to mention that Team Sabotage killed all 31% of the trash, but Raider IO opted to pull some of it down with him, if I'm not mistaken, as to likely have the Rogue build some of the combo points off it. I'm actually not sure where it went, but I did see them pull it down the cliff and jump off, so not sure if it kind of despawned and went back to the top or just evaded, whatever it may be. It didn't follow them in the end. They are on Rockmora now. Nothing too dangerous on this boss. You do want to make sure you avoid the frontal, but the skitterers are something we do need to talk about. Usually not that big of a deal, but in the Necrotic setting, as you mentioned, Jack, they will kind of get those cheeky melee hits on the tank, forcing a Necrotic refresh while the tank could be running away during one of the frontals or AoEs and resetting it.
Yeah, and thankfully that the tanks we are going to be in a fortified setting, because one of the most dangerous things is when you're in a tyrannical boss fight and you do have these smaller adds that you have to deal with here. It's not so much in the way of the extra damage from the boss's melee strikes or anything like that, but it's how much health that the bosses would end up having. So we are in that 22, we are in a fortified, so that's one scenario that they don't have to worry about, thankfully.
Yeah, and so for every skitterer that dies, you do get that green cloud on the floor, as we can see Rockmora kind of slightly and slowly being kited away by the tank to make sure that the players have access to the back of the boss, not getting parried or having any danger with the frontal. Rockmora dipping sub 20% now for both teams as Team Sabotage starts kiting it towards the exit. Both teams doing so. Really like to see this from both teams. Also, interesting fact to note for Rockmora's favorite ice cream is Rocky Road.
Thank you. I was actually curious, but that was going to be my next question to you. So
I knew
it
was.
So much. But it is kind of interesting, as you were mentioning. Maybe there was some kind of reset or evade bug that Raider IO was not prepared for. That they were hoping that they were able to get those extra mobs in. Not only getting the extra combo points, getting that eviscerate buff onto the rogue would make such a large difference for them to be able to get the the single target boss down. And it also is something that kind of harkens back to Skyline D. Is one of the things that we saw from them in the Chinese region, where they constantly were pulling more of those adds in and constantly did it on, for example, Rockmora, even with a Necrotic affix, to be able to just get more and more single target damage. So while it looks like they're at pretty even lengths right now, they will be a little bit behind because they're missing that trash.
Both teams just now finishing having a barrel of fun. They will hug the right side of this cave. Actually, they won't. Raider IO will boldly pull a lot of this trash, likely because they were expecting to have a higher percentage with some of that trash they pulled pre-Rockmora that never ended up dying. So they are pulling a lot of this front of the cave, intended or not. We'd have to see. We'll have to give them a call and find out later. Team Sabotage doing what we typically see as the more normal pull, where they hug the right side of the room, run all the way to the Pelters, pull up the big green Hulk that is, of course, not Luferigno. That is actually an evil crystal monster. They will slow everything and then move over, and the tank will start kiting away, because once you are out of range of the Pelters and the Berserkers, you will not proc any of the Pelter mechanics or the Avalanche, making it much safer for the rest of this group in this fortified setting.
Yep, and you're seeing both teams again having their DKs running for the high hills there. And Team Sabotage actually able to take advantage again of that Ring of Peace. When you're having one of the monks being able to go with the leg sweep, the other one opting for the Ring of Peace, and that really helps a lot more of the control, for example, on the Hulk there. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, dealing with the Hulk can be so problematic and so annoying because it can easily refresh your necrotic stacks, but when you're able to just keep on knocking it back and keeping it clumped up with the rest of the group for extra cleave damage, makes a world of difference for Team Sabotage and pulling ahead here.
Yeah, and you know, we commented on this earlier when I was casting one of these matches in the Guru for Lair, just how well teams sometimes do to keep that Hulk that can't be slowed with the rest of the group. Just all that cleave is really important. Team Sabotage moving up to Ularog's room, where I expect they will do another large pull with that 90-second CD Gorfiend's Grasp, pulling everything together. Now, important on this is not just the Pelters that will be kind of hitting the rest of the players here, but we've now been introduced, actually the pack before this, but we're also now slowly being introduced to Shapers in this dungeon, and Shapers will cast their Iron Bolt on players and do a ton of damage if not interrupted.
Yep, and that's one of the scariest things as you're getting all these trash packs in together, is making sure you're able to, you know, mark targets or designate targets to players, that the way they'll be able to go in and interrupt them. Every single time you have the Shapers, whoever actually ends up pulling aggro on them, the Shaper will cast the first bolt into that target. So really it's going to be on the second interrupt for both of those, getting them in together, then being able to get the mass stun out into Ring of Peace, into whatever other slows and CCs that you'll be able to have access to. So that's one of the biggest things that'll really set the tone, especially when you're having fortified settings like we have here, because they have so much more health and they have the potential to start dropping players lower and lower every single time that you're scaling the key up.
So both teams doing pretty much mirror pulls here, but we do see a kind of U-turn and a curve around from the Blood DK tank on Team Sabotage. I like seeing that because it saves a lot of that time, and we of course know DKs aren't the most mobile tanks in the world, so doing that kind of curl around as they finish off the Hulk allows them to get in position faster and pull Ularog a bit faster than Raider IO in this case. Both teams did leave that Shaper on the side of the room, which they can kind of deal with just a bit later if they choose to during this transition phase when they don't have access to the boss in just a moment for the teams here, or even pick it up with the boss and cleave as long as they're interrupting that Stone Bolt.
Yeah, and one of the nice things is you do have the Geode and that Shaper combined together in that trash pack, so both sides for the Warlocks that are able to get the Banish off onto the Geode, get their consistent Sephuz proc. The Holy Paladin could do that as well if they wanted to, which can make it a little bit easier whenever you have such melee-heavy compositions. You're going to actually have a very high healing requirement when you have to find the cup, the cup underneath, the ball underneath the cup. There we go. To be able to get, you know, even more healing out, getting the extra haste proc can make a world of difference. Or you could just be using it more offensively, getting the haste proc right before you actually come out of this phase, and being able to go into the boss and just dumping huge damage in.
Jack, I see no cups here, only totems, but the teams hopefully do guess the right ones. We do have Ularog already emerged for Team Sabotage, as we see the Warlock do well to miss the hands there, not get hit, doing a ton of damage if you get nicked by them. Now, there is also a nuke on the tank, a big nature spike that comes about every 7 to 12 seconds, something that you just want to keep wary of, make sure the tank's topped off in that regard. Necrotic, not too dangerous, affix on this boss, not going to stack it too quickly on the tank. Otherwise, as long as players watch out for hands, DPS the totems down quickly, then it's really not too much to worry about on this boss. However, both teams likely at this level of DPS will have to deal with another phase 2.
Yep, and being used to having to deal with those extra phase 2s, a lot of times you get to a point, even when you're just pushing keys, where, you know, even when you're having, you know, lust up and stuff like that, you know, getting so much closer, you're just seeing Team Sabotage getting very, very close here, but the boss's energy is about to reach full, and we'll actually start transitioning into that next phase here, so it can just be such a pain. But it is nice at least that you're going to be able to have some of the extra dots still ticking. You will still be able to get the boss very, very low when he comes out.
This is actually one of the closest we've seen some of the teams get to maybe even skipping the phase. Unfortunately, they don't manage to pull it off, but Team Sabotage getting sub 10% for that transition phase. In the meantime, Radar IO only at 19%, so pretty big difference between the two teams there, but unfortunately not a huge gain for Team Sabotage minus the 10%. They don't manage to kind of eke that kill out before the start of this phase.
And a lot of it just is on having, I believe it's just the double Windwalkers in so many ways, where you're able to have that extra single target damage, and because the healer damage, the tank damage on both sides is fairly close together, it's really just a world of difference having the double Windwalker to be able to just pump so much damage into that single target there. And like you said, they are going to be dealing with a Pelter. I think they're just leaving the Shaper as is, just leaving it be, going in peace. But they are just taking care of the Pelter as the tank starts moving on towards the next pull for Neuraxis.
Team Sabotage dealing with that Pelter as they move on towards Neuraxis trash, as you stated, Jack. Raider IO doing the same right now, opting to likely skip this 3-pack here. Perhaps we'll see some of the Crocodiles pull levels, especially because likely they didn't have things go their way with that the initial trash packs, leading up to Rockmora. They round the corner now and they prepare to pull some of their trash. As Team Sabotage is in the exact same place, we do see, of course, those basilisks on the side being pulled, all 4 of them over to some of Narax's trash.
Yeah, and both sides having the exact same pulls that are going to be going out there. But like you said, it is very interesting to see if they're going to be a little bit of extra trash that Raider.io needs to start making up here when they eventually kill Naraxis and they need to be able to move on. So it might be that they have to take down like a 2-pack just before they go into Dragul's room. So we've seen so many times where teams are trying to make sure that they're able to have, you know, as few Scorpions as they're able to deal with. I mean, being able to just deal with one or just being able to skip all of them entirely. I mean, we're seeing, you know, another death coming out for Team Sabotage, but they are going to have that 100% trash percentage. So, you know, again, this will be the same strategy that had won them in the original group bracket of being able to have those paralysis out and the reset out, thanks to just sacrificing, of course, their Holy Paladin to be able to reset the Scorpions and then just engage the boss from there.
And it looks like there seems to be a bit of damage that pulsed on to the Windwalker as he released, so the Grievous actually started stacking on them as well, so they have to keep an eye on not to incur that extra 5-second death. Raider.io has already pulled Naraxis on the left side of the screen. The first round of Devouts are out. Of course, if Naraxis does manage to eat these, starting with the left one on the screen, will gain a 50% damage buff for the remainder of the fight, including if the tank is eaten during the Spike Tongue, that's another 50%. Does stack up permanently for the rest of the fight. We do see some extra trash come in now in the form of the Basilisk that they want to cleave on top of those Devouts. So really smart by them, really efficient to try and get some of this trash involved with the boss. That really isn't too dangerous at the start, Jack.
It isn't. And one of the things is, you know, when you have so much room to start with, when you're less worried about any of the circles, for example, any of the slow spooges that are being placed down by Naraxis there. When you have, you know, a lot of the group, the ability to group up, you have these opportunities for not only your rogue, as we keep on talking about with Shuriken Storm, but you also have room for your warlock to be able to get, you know, some multi-dotting going on and being able to, you know, prolong the life of these ads. But it's also very scary because there is necrotic that they have to deal with. So the longer that they're keeping these out, you know, the harder it might end up being. So it's very important that they're kind of rotating through their stuns, rotating through slows to be able to keep these ads off. And you're seeing Lapan is actually able to make sure he's getting rid of his necrotic stacks as, of course, the Spike Tongue is coming out, and then getting right back into the boss to be able to, you know, reset and start pumping out more damage. And Raider.io is just really melting this boss right now.
Yeah, I mean, and the tank doing really well, Lapan, to do a death grip on the boss, which is essentially a taunt, making sure that it doesn't smack any of the melee by accident as he's running in from that Spike Tongue. They're still working to kind of finish the rest of the trash, do well to coordinate there with that stun as he ran away, as you mentioned. Naraxis now down to 3%, and the trash just about to die too, so everything really well timed by them. Team Sabotage down to 28% on Naraxis. Red Arrow only needs 6%, Jack. I'm pretty sure that's only one of the Scorpion packs, so they might do something similar here where they pull it only one of the Scorpion packs with the boss, and then the other one they CC.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that you know, always kind of stand out is when teams aren't as practiced and they haven't practiced doing the double skip with the Scorpions, both sides are going to have bloodlust for this. So if they're able to get out a little bit more, actually it looks like by pulling these extra mobs, they might just end up, yeah, they probably still will have to engage with one Scorpion. I think it's going to be about 4.5.
One Scorpion's like 4%, 4.5% on teaming. So
yeah, I guess if they're going to deal with a Trapper as well, though, so it looks like...
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll have to see what they come up with, but they are dealing with this first set of 2 Trappers plus the Berserker. Team Sabotage downing Naraxis, heading down the wormhole and heading over. Now, they're already 100%, so we're probably going to see an Invis Pot from them as we do. They just run right through the trash, and we're going to see, likely as we saw in the previous year, then we'll see the double paralysis come up on the left. Holy Paladin will sacrifice themselves on the right, and they will solo pull the boss.
Yep, and you're seeing here, Team Sabotage really is going to be making their own room as you're having that mass grip off to the side to be able to kind of push them away, and then you start opening up your room so much more, and they are going to have to expend that battle res onto Kagu there, which they thankfully have plenty of to be able to access here. Raider.io is going to be pulling theirs, following Free Marcy's strategy there, pulling it all into that pocket, but they also have to really, really make sure they're practicing with their positioning to make sure that they're, one of the things Sabotage did very, very well of having their Warlock out at range in between the boss and in between the paralyzed Scorpions out there. Makes it so much easier to make sure all the crystal shards are going to go back there. They hide behind the crystal shards. They're able to refresh paralysis.
Paralyzed, Jack.
Paralyzed. Words are tough.
I got you. I know. Have some more of that water, please.
Thanks, buddy.
Team Sabotage now slightly ahead, but they do have that 2 death differential. Here we go again with the death differential. That's how close these teams are together. 10 seconds. They have to win. They have to beat Darkgirl by 10 seconds. So once Darkgirl falls for Team Sabotage, which should fall first based on them pulling first. I mean, there's almost a 5-6% differential between the two teams. Raider IO will only have 10 seconds to catch up, assuming they do the rest of the fight well. And they're doing it quite well right now. I like this tanking up against the wall, kind of minimal movement and minimal spawn area for the two walls.
You're seeing a very, very close percentage here. Raider IO is really catching up and is about to start overtaking Team Sabotage. So never mind the two-death differential. Never mind the two-death differential. They're just going to be plowing right through, and they're going to be making sure that they're going to be annihilating this boss before Team Sabotage even has a chance to. So it's very, very close right now. You've seen Sabotage is actually pulling up a little bit ahead at this point. So, you know, with a cleave right now, it's going to be anybody's game, but it's definitely going to be in favor of Raider IO. That extra 10 seconds is a world of difference.
It's a world of difference, but Team Sabotage is actually pulling slightly ahead again. They have 5% under their belts. 10 seconds is not as much time as we think, as we've seen in previous matches, but once again, closing the gap, Raider IO with closing it to 2-3% now. Team Sabotage should be killing the boss. Your first question mark in a second, but it doesn't look like it. Raider IO will be getting the kill likely in time, and
that's it.
Again, that's it. So they actually end up taking the series. And once again, it was just 2 deaths. Actually, just one death would have done it. One death would have been enough. In fact, their strategy, they would have had a death no matter what, because their strategy